Welcome to your lecture on the sentence. This is possibly the most important lecture you're going to get all year. And the reason for that is because the sentence is the foundation of all other punctuation. So when you're starting to build longer sentences, when you start to edit problems in your own writing, you need to be able to identify these minimum parts of a sentence. When we think about the minimum parts, we're looking for things like subjects and verbs. Now, you've probably heard those terms before, but maybe you've forgotten why they're important in a sentence. Often when we're writing longer pieces of writing, we get caught up in making sure we have all the right words and that our sentences are expressing our ideas, but sometimes we lose track of the minimum parts. And the minimum part, again, is a subject and a predicate, or a subject and a verb. Now, we have some examples on the screen, and just take a moment to test yourself. Which of these two lines are complete sentences? Which ones are complete? Which ones have subjects and verbs? Okay. It is and snow falls. Both of those have subjects and verbs. It is, the subject is it, the verb is. Snow falls, the subject is snow. What is it doing? It's falling. The dog is just a subject. Walking in the park, just a predicate. We need to have both in order to have a complete sentence. Verbs are action words. Go, to be, I am, swimming, drinking, jumping. All of those are verbs. Subjects is the who is doing it. If we don't know who is doing something, we don't have a complete sentence. Typically, when we're talking about perspective also, subject comes into play. I, you, he. What's the perspective? If I ask you the perspective of a short story, or the perspective of a poem, or the perspective of an article, I'll want you to know who is telling you the story. Is it in the first person? Is it in the second person? Is it in the third person? First is I, second is you, third, he or she. Complete sentences always start with a capital letter and end with a period. Kind of sad that I have to say that, but with technology today, we often omit those things, and we need to make sure that we have them. In the example here, the dog climbed over the fence. The dog is our subject. Climbed is our verb. What did it climb over? The fence. Clauses are simply ways to talk about parts of sentences or sentences themselves. When we say clause, we really just mean part of a sentence or part of a longer sentence if we're building long ones. There are two basic kinds of clauses: independent clauses and dependent clauses. Independent clauses have subjects and verbs and can stand alone as sentences. Basically, they're like adults. They live on their own, they have apartments, they have cars, they have bills to pay. They're independent. That's one way I use to remember it. But they have a subject and they have a verb. Sometimes an independent clause is paired with a dependent clause. This is when you have an adult, an independent, and a child, I guess, a dependent clause. A dependent clause cannot live on its own. It can't pay its own rent, can't drive itself to school. Dependent clauses rely on the action of the main clause and cannot stand alone as sentences because they're missing something. They're missing a subject, they're missing a verb, or sometimes they're just using a very specific word that makes them reliant on another clause. In this case, the example on the screen, since they were undecided about the strike action, The word since creates a situation where you have a sentence fragment because it isn't complete. We don't know what happens since. Because we only have that part of the sentence, we only have the dependent clause, we have an incomplete sentence or a sentence fragment. If we want to fix this, we can do a couple things. We can remove the word since, and we'll have a complete sentence. They were undecided about the strike action. Great. The word since can be removed and it'll stand alone. But because we want to build it along with another sentence to make a more complete thought, we're going to add it to what happens after. The teachers, since they were undecided about the strike action, asked for more information. It's now a complete sentence because we have an independent clause. Now, other ways of arranging this. The teachers asked for more information since they were undecided about the strike action. Or, since they were undecided about the strike action, comma, the teachers asked for more information. Those are all great ways to arrange that sentence, but they all emphasize different information. And this is where style comes in. If you want to emphasize that the teachers asked for more information, you're going to put the teachers first. If you want to emphasize that they were undecided, you're going to put since they were undecided first. It depends on the tone that you're writing from. Relative clauses are also parts of sentences that rely on independent clauses. Relative clauses usually begin with that which, who, whom, or whose, and it will modify the noun that it follows. You'll see these usually after names. For example, Virginia Woolf, comma, who wrote Mrs. Dalloway, is a 20th century writer on the course. The novel, comma, which recalls the memories of a middle-aged woman, explores societal ills in post-World War I England. All of these are relative, and they're dependent on the action of an independent clause. Let's take a look at some examples. Eating at KFC. Is that a fragment or is it complete? That is a fragment. I like chickens. Fragment or complete? It's complete. It has a subject and it has a verb. I like. The black dog peed on the hydrant. Is that a fragment or is it complete? That would be complete. We have the black dog, that's our subject. Pee is our verb. When my hair burst into flames. Fragment or complete? That's a fragment. It's a fragment because it has used the word when at the beginning. Whenever you use the word when, you're making the rest of the sentence dependent on an independent clause. When my hair burst into flames, I ran and stuck my head under the sink would complete that sentence. Now, once we have an understanding of a complete sentence and what we're looking for, subjects and verbs, we can fix errors of joining. We can fix fragments, comma splices, and run-ons. In the feedback you get in your course, your instructor is going to tell you if you have fragment, if you have a comma splice, if you've made an error with a run-on. Take a look at the annotations to figure out what's happening with your own writing, and if you're making one of these problems consistently, take some steps to fix it by finding the subjects and finding the verbs. So if you remember what the minimum components are of a complete sentence, you'll remember that we're looking for those subjects and we're looking for those verbs. A sentence fragment is going to occur when one of those elements of the sentence is missing and we don't know who is doing the action or what the subject is doing. For example, running along the highway. Who is running? When the timing is right, well, what's going to happen? In order to fix the sentence fragment, we need to complete the sentence with a subject or what the subject is doing. Here are some errors. I experienced an odd desire, period, looking at the full moon. Here, in order to correct this, we can simply put these two together. I experienced an odd desire looking at the full moon. We can take the period out and join the two. At a position near the ocean of storms on the surface of the moon. Ooh, what happened? You saw something, you did something. In example 3, the goalie lost his stick in the mad scramble, which led to the winning goal. Here we have a relative clause. We can put a comma between these two sentences, and we can complete the sentence and fix the fragment. In example 4, a novel about a boy who loses his parents to a disaster at sea. Well, what's the novel? What's the name of the novel? Who, what? So there's information missing, and we need to make sure we provide it. Run-on sentences happen when two or more sentences run together without any punctuation. For example, smartphones come with shopping, banking, and social media apps. These tools are useful to today's consumer. So we can fix this by finding the subjects and finding the verbs. Where does the second sentence start? Well, smartphones come with shopping, banking, and social media apps. These tools. Okay. The subject here, the first subject, is smartphones. The second subject is these tools. So we know we have to break the sentence before the second subject, because typically the subject is the start of your sentence. We can use different kinds of punctuation as well. For now, we'll just use the period. As the course progresses, we'll talk about semicolons and conjunctions. Comma splices happen when a comma is used to join two complete sentences. You have to imagine complete sentences or independent clauses as very large and heavy. Because they are complete, they're like a big adult, and you can't connect two big adults with a teeny tiny weak piece of punctuation like a comma. It's just not strong enough. It's like, I don't know, using a thread to tie together two biceps on two different people. It's just not going to hold. For example, the frustrated student tried to shut down his computer for several minutes. He finally had to resort to unplugging the power source. You can think of commas almost like pauses. It's a fairly brief pause, and you need a bigger pause between complete sentences in order just to take a breath. So here, between these two complete sentences, ideally, you're going to put a period, or you can also use commas, or sorry, not commas, colons. You can use a colon or a semicolon as well. We'll learn more about those as the course progresses. So for now, we'll just use a period. Again, in order to fix this, you need to find the subject and the verb. You need to be able to find the subject here, the frustrated student, the verb, try. He, another subject, had to resort, or another verb. So we have a subject and a verb here. We have a subject and a verb here. So we need something stronger than a comma between them. If comma splices are a known problem for you, take a look at the fanboys comma or complex coordinating conjunctions just to get ahead of the issue. Your instructor will let you know if you're creating any of these errors in your own writing. Take a look at the following examples and use them to practice for any quizzes or reflections for the course.